mathematical calculations such as addition, subtracting numbers, multiplying a bunch of numbers, and then dividing. So addition in Excel, it's represented usually by using the sum function, sum or the plus sign. So you could have a bunch of a couple numbers within parentheses and you use a plus between those two references. And we tried so I would recommend that you use the sum function for that, just like we did over here. Subtraction, it's usually just the minus sign on the keyboard. Multiplication, it's the asterisk, the shift and 7 in a Windows PC. Actually, it's shift and number 8 in a Windows PC. And then dividing, it's by a slash, represented by just simply typing a slash here. So in our case here we have another example. Let's say that we have these employees. This is their pay. They have to pay different deductions. Deduction number 1, deductions number 2. So now we want to calculate the total of those deductions. So we have deduction 1 and deduction 2, and that will give us the total of these deductions. So what we do here is we press the equal sign, and then we put sum, open parentheses, and then just pick those two cells. Hit enter, and it is $289, for example. Now, in this case, you'd say, well, why didn't I do the equal sign or the plus sign here? The reason why you don't want to do the plus sign is because at some point between deduction 1 and deduction 2, you might insert a new column, and then whatever that new column that you insert is going to be part of your new range. So now what you do is, notice there is also a warning here that says the formula in this cell refers to a range that is additional adjacent to it. So it's basically saying, hey, you might have forgotten to include this one over here, but we're not interested in that because we're doing something else at this point. We just want to add the deductions. So now if you wanted to add all of these deductions together, all you do is you use the autofill feature. And actually that's not adding them together, it's basically replicating that same formula in the other cells. So again, I clicked on it and I dragged it down. And notice those have been represented. So that for this guy that is making $9,000 a month, he has to pay $693 in deductions. Now, if we wanted to figure out what his net pay is, what we would do here is that we need to basically take his gross pay minus the deductions. So what we do in this case is the equal sign, and then we choose the payment minus the deductions. And then we hit enter. So again, what we did, equal sign, the first number, first value, the total pay, minus the deductions. And then we can replicate this using the autofill feature. So the net pay for Bill is, instead of getting $9,000, he's actually getting only $8,375. So now what we'll do is, let's say we want to figure out the annual income for him or for any of those employees. So what we do is, let's say we want to figure out the annual net pay. Usually it's the gross pay that you calculate, but let's say for now we want to include the annual one. So the annual would be the monthly times 12. So the way you put that in a formula is the equal sign, this number, the net pay, times 12. Usually it's not recommended that you encode in a formula actual numbers. However, this is the month of the year, so this is a round number, and it's most likely not going to change, but usually keep in mind you reference something. So it would be very similar to like saying annual. And then in another cell here you say it's going to be 12. So what you do in this case, instead of 12, you change that to be this value, L20. and if I hit enter I still get the same value. So now let's drag this down using the autofill feature, and I'll actually explain this later why this did not work. So let's go back. I'll explain this on the absolute references in a little bit. So now it works. And the reason is because we are using an absolute reference, we are referring to this value here, and I'll explain that shortly. So the other thing that you can do here is, let's go back to the values the way they were. So instead of using the reference, we'll use just 12 for simplicity and not being confused. So here is G12, that'll be annual net income. G23 times 12. Drag this down, and that's the net income for everyone. Now let's get rid of these. Now let's say we wanted to divide this per week, so pay per week, so we can learn about division. So now the pay per week, remember this is the total for the annual, and we want to divide that for each week. So a year has 52 weeks. So what we do here is we press the equal sign, the number divided, so the annual income divided by 52, and then we hit enter. And the same, we can drag this down, and then the last one, Bill Allen, since he's making $90,000 or $100,000 a year, he is making around $2,000 a month, or actually per week here. So that's the division. Now keep in mind, for multiplication like we did here, and division and also subtraction, notice there is no function that you need to include, because for these other guys here, for these other references here, if you remember, we had to include the actual function, the max, and so on. For subtraction, multiplication, and dividing, you don't need to use those. And again, keep in mind that subtraction is the minus sign, multiplication the asterisk, and dividing is the slash. Welcome back to learning about Excel and some of the concepts in Excel. In this session I'm going to cover some of the basic components and doing some basic calculations using Excel. What I have here is a predefined worksheet, or actually a spreadsheet with a bunch of worksheets. So notice I have one tab called Basic Calculations, Data Filtering, and all types of other stuff. So what I have on these cells is that I have different types of data. The data here is basically either text or numbers, so it's just a matter of typing something here in each one of those cells. Okay, so at this point what we are going to do is we're going to figure out how to add those numbers up using a formula, because the benefit and the advantage of using Excel is the use of formulas. So here's one thing to keep in mind as you're dealing with spreadsheets. It doesn't matter what application you're using, they all pretty much use the same concept here. So usually all formulas in Excel start with the equal sign. That's how the computer knows that this what you're entering in there, it's a formula, it's going to be a calculation of some sort. Then there is the function. We'll learn about functions shortly. For example, sum. So it will be equal sign, SUM, and then the starting point for your range, so it could be B1 all the way to B10, and then close parentheses. So you have the equal sign, the function, then the starting point in your range, colon, and then the end point in your range. This is one of the key concepts. It's very important that we remember this in our study of Excel. So now let's go to, back to Excel here. So let's say we want to add all of these numbers up. There are a couple ways of doing it. One of them is by using the AutoSum function right here, but I want to show you how you can calculate and enter this calculation by using the formula. So like we said earlier, it starts with the equal sign, then we start with the starting point, which is actually the next thing that we add here is sum, S-U-M, then open parentheses, and then we type C5 colon C13. So we want to start on C5 and then end on C13. Then we close parentheses. And then we hit enter. So the total of all of these numbers is 1386 at this point. Notice that's the formula that we are using. So that was one way to enter the formula. Now another way to enter the formula is by using the equal sign, the function, and then open parentheses, and then just drag the mouse over the range where you want to select the numbers. So from the starting point to the end, and then you let the mouse go. Then hit enter. And notice we get the same values. Now one other cool thing here with Excel is that, and this is where the power of Excel comes in, that you can change one of those values from 100 to 200, and notice what will happen as soon as I hit enter. It will change the total automatically. So the next thing what you can do here is, of course, you can use the automated calculation from here from the toolbar under the editing tab, and then in there, for example, we want to add all these numbers. You can click on auto sum here, or just click on the drop down and choose sum, and now Excel will try to figure out as to what you want to calculate. However, you have to be very careful as to what the program is selecting, because sometimes you may not want just like that way. You want it a different range. So that's why I wanted to show you the other method first, the manual way. So hit enter here, and this will be calculated and coming to 1972. The manual way, which is what I actually recommend to get used to this, is equal, the function, sum, and then select the range. Even the one that is blank, make sure you select it, because at some point you might add a number in there, and then it will give you the total here once we hit enter. So if I added something in that blank one, because I had it in the range, it's going to calculate correctly. So that's a couple ways of entering the formulas to add a bunch of numbers up. So again, equal, sum. Notice if you don't put the parentheses, what happens. So equal, sum, open parentheses, and select the range. Now you'd say, well, why can't I always use this drop down from here? The reason for that is because in the next version of Excel that might not be available, or in OpenOffice that might not be available, or in Google Docs if you're using the sheets in Google Docs, that may not be available the same way, like with the button there. So you need to know the logical way of how to do this. The other reason is because if I go and I want to put the total for this column back here, if I click on the auto sum, the computer does not know, or it's not picking the right range here. So notice it's picking these numbers. So what you can do is you can select the range with the mouse and then hit enter, and notice we have now the total back here. So the idea is that you can, in any cell, you can reference other cells. Again, you would not put each number manually here like 300, 500. Always put the reference for that number. So C5, the address, because you can change the numbers at any point, and then those values will be updated automatically. So now at this point, let's learn another trick here. So let's say that I wanted to put the totals for these other numbers in here. There's a feature called autofill here. So instead of you having to enter the formulas for each one of those, they're all exactly the same. What you can do is you hold the mouse on the bottom right, and when it changes to a little plus sign, the thin one, not the thick plus sign, so not like that, but this kind, then you drag it to the right, and that will give you the totals appropriately. And the way it works is that you can use this from left to right or from top and down. For example, if I wanted to get the total here, let's say I have the first formula here. So in this case, the formula would be equal. Let's say I wanted to get the total for training for all the months. I would have the equal sign, then the function sum, and then the starting range and the end range. So C3 through E5. Hit enter, notice it comes with 800. Instead